So today I want to talk about the grief process over the loss, the recent death of my Aunt Josie, who was my father's older sister, and she was in her late 70s. So this picture was taken last year when I went back to visit my family after about 4 years, and she's the one sitting right next to me, top left, and then the other people, my father right in front of me, you can probably tell, and then my uncle and aunt on the other side. And so my aunt was diagnosed, I guess, shortly after this photo was taken with gallbladder cancer and liver cancer. And then soon after, we learned that it had metastasized to her pancreas and possibly her lungs. And so at that point, I knew the diagnosis was not good. My grandmother had passed away from pancreatic cancer 10 years before, so I knew what a high mortality rate that carried. And I went out to visit my family again this past August, specifically thinking that it might be the last time that I saw my Aunt Josie, and I'm glad that I did because she died about a month later. So during meditation one morning, I found myself talking to her, just sort of comforting her, soothing her, like coaching her through the dying process, saying, don't be afraid, trust your good heart, you lived a good life, you've done everything that you needed and wanted to do, just don't be afraid. And when I came out of meditation, I said, well, that's quite odd. What was that about? And I said, well, I guess she's probably died. I never had that kind of experience before. And I kept checking my email after that for that day, expecting an email, but I didn't see one. I knew my dad would email me right away. And then the next day, I felt this really heavy energy, this sort of very deep sadness, like I was kind of sinking into the earth. And I'm like, okay, I think this is another sign that she's passed on, but still no email from him. And then only a couple days later did I get a call, or actually Venerable Samten got a call asking me to call him immediately. And it turns out he had had a minor stroke the same day that she died, and he had been in the hospital getting an operation, and that's why he hadn't emailed me right away. And for the next couple of weeks, waves of depression came up at sort of unexpected times. They were unexpected because I hadn't been thinking about her. I hadn't been thinking about her death. It's just like this feeling within my body, this very heavy, dark feeling. And it was very puzzling. I wasn't sure if it was grief or if it was, something else. I've had depression in the past. And that was very troubling. Intellectually, I had been prepared from her death, but these feelings of grief could show me that some part of me was still clinging to her permanence in the idea that she was this solid person who would just continue on indefinitely. And grief is still a somewhat unfamiliar process for me. I haven't had many people close to me die, and it just seems like a very complex and multi-layered process. Involves many different emotions, and it has its own rhythm you can't exactly predict. That's also what I've heard from some of the Sangha members here who have had family members die. So I find it quite an interesting process because it shows just how much takes place within our mind outside of our conscious awareness, how there's these emotions and these thoughts, these processes going on that can just appear and surprise us and catch us off guard, reminding us we're actually not in control of our minds and what's going on. And even if we're not consciously thinking of something, still part of us can be very affected at a deep level by what's happened. So when those waves of sadness came up, I also criticized myself, thinking, okay, this is attachment. You're believing in impermanence. You knew she was going to die. Why are you feeling this way? You're basically not such a great practitioner. And so that wasn't kind at all, obviously. It didn't help. But it did show me that maybe I'm not as far along as I think I am. No matter how many times I intellectually meditate on someone's death, when it actually happens, these emotions take over, and that's just where I am right now. But I think the most painful part of the process of her passing away was feeling like a light had gone out in the world. She had been my godmother and someone that I really deeply trusted. And I mourn the loss of comfort and refuge that I always felt when I was in her presence. And then growing up, every major holiday, she would host both sides of the extended family at our house. So I have a lot of memories of running around in a full house. And she was always taking care of other people. That seemed to be her main orientation, which I think she got from my grandmother. So she was always tending to her guests, especially the children, and then her grandchildren, making sure they had enough food, that they were happy, that they felt safe. She was always cooking with her husband, and she was just a very warm and friendly person, not just to me and her family, but to everybody. And yeah, she just made everyone else the center of her life. She kept working so she could take her grandchildren on travel. And this provided a very real life experience for me of what it means to put others before yourself and to serve others. And not because you're lesser than other people, but because other people deserve love. And it's a very natural human thing to want to give and express love to others. And the good qualities that she and my grandmother demonstrated while I was growing up of kindness, generosity, fortitude, forgiveness, selflessness, I think did influence me to lead a spiritual life. They showed me that pursuing money and status is really not the real route to happiness, but it's rather how you treat others. So what I want to take away from this grieving process is committing to cultivating within myself those qualities that I admired so much in her, such as generosity, love, tolerance, strength, so that I can be a refuge not only for myself, but for others. And her good qualities are actually what I admired most about her. And thankfully, these qualities can be cultivated by almost anyone. And therefore, her death has not negated her life, but in large part, her life continues to carry forward through the good qualities that she taught to her children and her grandchildren and her nieces and nephews. So in this process, I'm hoping to turn what's a personal grieving process into something that can extend out and benefit others. I want to celebrate her life and death in a way that contributes to her encountering good circumstances and her next rebirths, where she can continue to grow her good qualities. And when someone dies, I think it's a really close to us dies. It's a really good chance to ask ourselves, am I living in accord with my highest values? Am I truly appreciating what that person did for me and gave to me while they were alive? And by continuing to carry out their good deeds and to continue to cultivate their good qualities within ourselves, we can stay connected to them despite the loss of physical presence, and hopefully be able to benefit them in the future and lead them to liberation in Buddhahood, if that's our goal.